this week brings the new moon in the sign of Virgo. Now, Virgo is the organized sign. It means now is a really good time to get organized, get your stuff in order, and try and make your life more functional. That's what the new moon in Virgo is all about. So what can you do for yourself this week that's going to help you to start to feel as though you have all your ducks in a row? That is the question. One thing to know about this week, though, is that really just after the new moon in Virgo, we have a clash between Mars and Neptune. So Mars is the planet of drive and determination, but it's also the planet of anger and brashness. And Neptune is the planet of soulmates and poetry, as you're going to hear more about soon. But it's also the planet of deception, disappointment, and confusion. So when the planets are clashing, as they are this week, just after the new moon, it does kind of stamp the new moon with a bit of a difficult energy, which is why this week, and I will give you this interview in a minute, before we finish my little intro, I do want to do a little card for you. But it's why this week we're playing out the interview that I did with Priya Kale, who is a wonderful astrologer that I know from the States. She's actually Indian, but she lives in New York. And we're talking about Neptune. So stay tuned for that. If this is all a bit confusing, guess what? Neptune's confusing. So we're going to try and help you understand how self-delusion, disappointment, anything like that can mess with the law of attraction in a week that Mars is clashing with Neptune. But before we go, let's do the Oracle card of the week.
A message from the Moonology Oracle.
So the new moon in Virgo from my beautiful Moonology manifestation deck. Sometimes we want everything to happen yesterday, but divine timing is a real thing. And if you're hearing this, this is for you. Sometimes we need more pieces of a jigsaw to fall into place before we can get what we want. So if you are currently thinking, when am I going to get what I want? You might have a few more pieces of the jigsaw that need to fall into place. Slowing down now is the key for you to get what you want. So take your time and allow events to unfold. See what you can do for others as a really quick and easy way to both distract yourself and boost your good karma while you wait for your dreams to manifest. There's a reason why you're hearing this, so make sure you pay attention and trust that all will be well. Now, the archangel to work with, if you like working with angels, is Archangel Metatron. And your affirmation for the week, it's based on the fact that this is the new moon in Virgo, which is a very helpful sign. We all have Virgo in our chart somewhere. Okay, you ready? I help others and others help me. I help others and others help me. I help others and others help me. Make that your affirmation this week.
Your questions answered.
So I'm recording this way in advance and I don't actually have a question in front of me. So I'm going to give you a question that everybody asks me. Where do I find the money in my chart? It's probably the number one question that I get from people saying, how do I mine my astrology chart for cash? So I just wanted to give you a little how-to in terms of finding out where the money is in your chart. We actually have two money zones in our chart, the second house and the eighth house. Okay, so step number one, you need to find out your rising sign. Okay, if you don't know your rising sign, you can go to moonmessages.com/free chart. One word, moonmessages.com/free chart. So you have your rising sign, which is basically at 9 o'clock on your chart. Now, what is the next sign along? Okay, if you don't know the order of the signs, then just look it up on Google. What is the next sign along from your rising sign? That is your first money box. Now, just say you're Gemini rising. That means Cancer or Moonchild, or AKA Moonchild, rules your second house of cash. If you're Leo rising, that means Virgo is the next sign along. So Virgo rules your house of cash. All right. If you're Aries, it means the next sign along is Taurus. So Taurus rules your house of cash. Now, as well, you also have a second money box, which is the sign opposite the one that rules your first house of cash. Okay. So I'll just quickly tell you about the opposites. If you've got a pen, and pause. I'll try and slow down a bit so you can write it down. So here are the pairs, the opposite pairs of the zodiac. Aries, Libra. Taurus, Scorpio. Gemini, Sagittarius. Cancer, or as I like to call it, Moonchild, Capricorn. Leo, Aquarius. Virgo, Pisces. So if you're Leo rising, Virgo rules your second house of cash, Pisces rules your other house of cash. All right, and so on and so forth. Virgo rising, then Libra rules your second house of cash. Opposite sign is Aries, because the opposites work in both directions. Okay, so now what are you meant to do with all this information? Well, for one thing, now you know that whenever there's a new moon in one of those signs that rule your two houses of cash, your second house and your eighth house, that means it's a new start for you financially. So start to pay attention. Oh, it's a new moon in Aquarius. Oh, that rules my second house of cash because I'm Capricorn rising. Oh, okay. Or a new moon in Leo, that rules my other house of cash. So then you can start to set your intentions, make commitments and so on. But also that only happens twice a year. There's a new moon in each sign basically once a year, apart from once in a blue moon. But also the other thing you can do is the moon goes through all 12 signs every month, every month. Okay, so once a month, the moon will be in your second house of cash, and then it'll be in your eighth house, the opposite sign. It will also be in the eighth house about 2 weeks later. So that means you have these two very distinct periods where the moon is in the sign that rules your second and your eighth house, which means it's very much the time for you to be focusing on cash. All right. And I'm just going to say, you know, while I'm saying all this, I'm thinking about my Moonology diary for next year. We've got a beautiful cover, but the diary, the Moonology diary 2025 will help you to understand all this even better. So you can start to understand, oh, there's a new moon in my cash zone, or there's a full moon in my cash zone, and what it all means and how to work with it. So if you don't have a copy of the Moonology diary, hop over to moonmessages.com/diary, moonmessages.com/diary. Get your diary. You also get a whole stack of free bonuses. And I think there might even be something in there about money as well. So there you go. I hope that helps. So this week, I am extremely excited to welcome to the show one of my favorite astrologers, Priya Kale, who I met for the very first time in New York many years ago now. And we keep, every time I go to New York, I contact Priya and I'm like, are you there? And she's either there or sometimes you're in India, aren't you?
That's true.
And she's one place, she's usually, is it Mumbai or
yes,
New York?
Mumbai.
Yeah. And so she's there, we usually have dinner, and if she's not, well, next time. So welcome to the show, Priya. So normally at this point, I would read out your biography, but I'm going to, we've just had a pretty amusing 10 minutes chit chat before we turned the recording on. So I don't have it in front of me. So, you know, why don't you tell us, Priya, what kind of astrologer are you, and what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about something to do with the planets. It's about mysticism for anyone who's wondering, but take it away, Priya.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, first of all, for having me, Yasmin. It's such an honor, and I love connecting with you in person, online, whatever it is. We go back. So thank you. Appreciate it. So today I got on the phone, and Yasmin and me were trying to figure out what we were going to speak about. So this is unplanned, but we're going to talk about Neptune today. And Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces. It's the planet that's associated with mysticism, magic, spirituality, God, whatever.
Confusion, deception, alcohol, drugs.
Illusions, drugs. So it's everything, right? Glamour, the movies, music.
Yeah. So can I just say what the thing I love to say about Neptune? So it's a spectrum. Right. So all the planets are a spectrum, but Neptune in particular is an interesting spectrum to me. So at one end, you more or less have enlightenment, okay? Right. And at the other end, you pretty much have rolling around drunk in the gutter, looking up at the stars.
Exactly.
It's really that spectrum. And somewhere in the middle is the smoke and mirrors of Hollywood and glamour. There's a bit of deception. It's like, You know, it's just that it's the planet that it's just a mysterious planet. It's the planet of the numinous Neptune.
Nebulous. And in India, I mean,
nebulous.
according to Vedic, you know what they in Sanskrit, it's the planet of Maya, right? Maya is the great illusion. Yes, so Neptune, you know, can represent that great Maya, the great illusion, which the veil is not on the world, it's on our eyes. And so, how can we access the energy of this, you know, outer planet that's so transcendent and nebulous at times?
And also, we should say it's also the planet of chanting and meditation and,
Absolutely.
you know, all those sorts of ethereal things that we do.
Exactly. And that's what I guess, that was the point that I was trying to make is it's such a vast ocean, right? We were swimming in this cosmic ocean of Neptune, of Pisces. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. And that's why we have the two fish, you know, the symbol of Pisces swimming in the opposite direction, which is the example you gave. On the one hand, we have enlightenment and transcendence, one fish swimming towards light, and then the other fish swimming down into the gutter, you know?
Exactly.
But ultimately, that's what Pisces teaches us. You know, whichever way you go, ultimately, there is one transcendent reality beyond this physical existence.
So,
And
yes,
sorry,
I think at that point, Priya, it would be a really good point to pause just for a moment and tell people
sure.
a little bit about you, because
Okay.
you have definitely gone down the Neptunian Piscean path in your spiritual
Yes,
studies.
I
And
have.
tell us about where you've been, what you've discovered, and how astrology fits into it. And any Neptune
Yeah.
references welcome.
Thank you, Yasmin. And that's a wonderful question. And I'm glad you asked at this point because it's the perfect segue. See, my relationship with astrology, and it's all relevant to our conversation today. My grandfather was an astrologer. So in one sense, it's in my blood. I was 2 years old when my father showed me a lunar eclipse, and I spent the next 6 months telling everybody what it was.
Hmm.
So, and then when I started to read, like my parents were both Sagittarian. So they would always take us to bookstores. That was like our, you know, family outing was going to a bookshop.
I love it.
Yeah. And I would always get lost in the occult and astrology section. Like my parents, where's Priya? Oh, yeah, she's probably in the astrology section. And that's where they'd find me. And I was maybe 5, 6 years old. I couldn't even read. I mean, I was barely reading, right? I couldn't read Indian astrology because it was too, at the time, inaccessible for a child. There were like old men writing thick theses on astrology.
Yeah.
So sun sign astrology was the easiest way for me to get into it, you know, understand it and have it make sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
Right.
then later, I mean, I always loved it. I studied it. And then later in life, I moved to New York and I was in love. I got married. And then, you know, I got divorced, which came out of the blue. And it really shook my world. I was in my 20s then, mid 20s. And so my studies in astrology deepened because I really was looking for answers, you know? I couldn't understand what was going on because I was happy.
And what was going on?
At the time I had Pluto was conjunct my Neptune. Funnily enough, since we're talking about Neptune,
yeah,
and I always described it as a total loss of illusions.
Yeah, absolutely exploding any illusions you had about your marriage.
It stripped away all of my illusions, right?
Yeah.
But it also, and I can say this more now, 20 years later, 25 years later, as I've grown, it also taught me to love unconditionally.
And it cracked you open. Pluto on your Neptune cracked you open to the spirituality you embraced, I suppose.
Completely. So it was very confusing, as you said, as you pointed out.
Yes, Neptune is very confusing to people.
And then the only thing that I could hold on to was my spirituality. And that was the Neptune. There was nothing else to hold on to. It felt like the whole world it literally happened soon after 9/11. So I felt like my world was collapsing along with the world.
Yeah.
It was a very, intense time. And then around my Saturn return is when I wrote to an astrologer who was looking for an apprentice. I was thrown into the deep end. I started reading charts. I met Yasmin probably in the same year. And 18 years later, here I am. I will say that after I started doing astrology, which was, in professionally in 2006. So now we're 18 years later. Full nodal cycle, Yasmin.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, maybe 4 or 5 years into it, actually very quick into it, a couple of years later, I had a massive spiritual awakening. And
tell us what happened, please.
Oh,
as much as you can.
Actually, it's funny because you're part of this story as well. It was 2 years after I'd started writing astrology, and in 2008, December, I get an email from Yasmin saying, hey, Priya, will you fill in for me for the first couple of weeks of horoscopes for Yahoo? I remember, for 2009. And I said, yes, of course. Because I was a baby astrologer. To have that opportunity was amazing. But the catch was you wanted the deadline was like 2 or 3 days. And I wasn't even sure how I was going to get it done in those 2 or 3 days.
But I was been going on a last minute trip or something. Sorry.
Yes, I think you couldn't do it, and you needed some help, and it was one of those things. So I will preface, leading up to it, this was of course a few years after my divorce, where I was going through this intense spiritual awakening. In retrospect, I can see that it was happening all along.
Well, Pluto, Neptune can cause spiritual awakenings,
right? So when you wrote to me, I was at a peak of that transformation where I was in such a place. I mean, before the email, I had gotten to such a place of deep surrender within myself and with God, where I would literally every day I would cry to God. Like there was nothing wrong in my life, but it was such an intense longing that I cannot explain. I don't think I've ever felt that intensely even since then. So I remember when you sent me that email, I woke up that morning just saying, okay, God, I don't know how this is possible. It's not humanly possible. You've got to help me. And I went about my day, and somewhere in the middle of that, it was just, in one moment, I was standing buying a sandwich. My plan was I'm going to buy the sandwich, go home and lock myself in the room and write those horoscopes. That was my plan. And I'm standing in the sandwich shop waiting for the guy to make my sandwich. It's 13th of December. There's no windows in this cafe, tiny cafe on the Upper East Side. Snow starts to fall outside. It's really pretty. And Silent Night comes on the radio. And I'm just watching, I'm just witnessing, right? Everything they say in spirituality, I'm just witnessing what's happening. And then in that one split second, Yasmin, it was like time stood still. And eternity happened in a split second, where I felt like this gust of wind, whatever you want to call it, just hit me in the head, where I thought I was going to buckle down to my knees. It was so powerful. And I just ended up saying, thank you, God, in that moment. That was the only thing that I could say. And then after that, I could just, in the days that progressed, I went home, wrote the horoscopes, but I was having a massive awakening when I felt each and every one of my chakras open up, right? That's the first time I knew, like I had that experience.
That's amazing.
And after that, like my world changed. Like I could never go back to not knowing reality, right? Having experienced that. Like I'd read about chakras, but when you feel them, that's a whole different story. So then I knew that, astrology alone, yes, but it's still pointing me to my own spirituality inside. And since then, since 2008 till, that was till now, that was Pluto in my 9th house, Capricorn. The entire journey has been a spiritual journey, really. So I'm doing the astrology, but what I've learned is at the end of the day, if we're not meditating and if we're not connecting with the source within, we're just going to be spinning around in circles watching these planets, and you could be doing that for eternity.
So true.
So speaking of Neptune, with Neptune now at 29 degrees of Pisces this year, and I'll pause here, Yasmin, take it from me. Next year, Neptune is going to enter Aries, which is the sign of the self. And we know that the collective is becoming more aware of spirituality, mysticism, manifestation, all of these things, which is great. But now with Neptune entering Aries, we're also going to have to learn to tune into ourselves very deeply. or it's going to get very disorienting, because we're all divine beings. We are not, some of us, if you've been doing your spiritual practice and you're tuning in and you're living more self-aware, conscious, that's fine. You're on a journey of growth. It's not a blame, or it's not looking down on people. Everybody, we're all one. We're all one. So soon, with that Neptune moving from Pisces to Aries, we're going to realize how one we are. What affects you is going to affect me. And there's no separation there. So in one sense, we're going to have to have more clear boundaries.
Good luck with that.
Right? And then on the other hand, we're going to have to learn to have more compassion as well. So how do we find balance? Maybe that's part of what's going on with these eclipses right now.
I love it. Okay, so just so people understand, this is not Neptune moving into Aries, doesn't happen every day of the week.
Yeah.
Neptune takes about 165 years to go around the sun.
Exactly. So it's a once in a lifetime transit.
So it's a once in a lifetime. And it's going to happen next year, but we will already be feeling it.
We will already be feeling it. So this year is very magical, mystical, and it's magical and in the simplest of ways, like music, right? Neptune represents music. Music, there's spells. You're casting spells with music. Pay attention to the music you're listening to. Don't listen to sad, depressing songs too much. You are casting spells.
And what about if you're writing music?
Writing music, same thing. But what are mantras, right? Mantras is the purest form of that Neptune. That's why we have that transformation. It's the sound vibration. It's the vibration of sound.
The thing is, what I love talking to you about this, because I haven't really talked much about Neptune into Aries. I haven't even thought much about it. What I've really thought about is the fact that Neptune's been in Pisces for quite a long time. And let's just see how long that's actually been.
It's been there since 2011 or 12, 2012, February 2012.
Yeah, 2011 to 2025. Okay. I suppose, for us, if I can include you, but definitely for me, as someone who loves to, try and connect with my spiritual side as much as I possibly can, even in this crazy world where all this stuff's going on, and wanting to stay on target. And, if you live in an ashram, great, then you're probably going to be more on target. But if you're New York City or wherever, and in a way, I've enjoyed the whole Neptune in Pisces thing because it's brought spirituality to the fore, because it's the spiritual planet in the spiritual sign, more or less.
Right.
And although all planets are spiritual in their own way and all signs are spiritual in their own way, but these are overtly poster children for spirituality and mysticism.
Absolutely.
And so in a way, I've been a bit like, oh, what's going to happen when it leaves Pisces and it's going to move into Aries? Are we going to not actually have that anymore? But now you're talking about it as like maybe, Neptune, because Neptune's still Neptune. It's just, in the far more rambunctious sign of Aries.
Right.
But as you say, it can be about, instead of being a generalized spirituality, maybe it's going to be more about people realizing, what my teacher in India says, which I have no proof either way, but my teacher in India, Sri Shakti Narayani Amma, says we are all God.
Yes.
So, who am I to disagree with a spiritual teacher?
I mean,
which is Neptune in Aries, because Neptune is the divine and Aries is the self. And it's like, we are all God. So if we all figure that out.
Exactly. So it's that Neptune, which is so transpersonal, and Pisces, which is such a void, big ocean. Now it's coming to Aries, which is like, it's about the self. That God is within. We're all manifestations of the divine. There's one divine consciousness alive in so many different forms and bodies. So when we say, I am Priya, I am Yasmin, I am Aileen, the names are just names. The I am, that is divine, right? That consciousness is divinity. So we're going to have to learn, the shift is going to slowly start to bring that divinity home. It's like coming home to ourselves. Of course, this is at best. And that's why I'm saying It can be, it's important that we learn to tune in. It's important that we learn to sit in meditation and silence. And I know it's not easy.
Well,
So,
especially when Neptune moves into Aries, which is ruled by Mars, which is the like zooming planet. We're all going to
right?
be wanting to do, spirituality really fast.
Right. But then think about what is Mars. Mars is action, but Mars is also about being, right? It's the child of the
Yeah.
zodiac. So it's like the trust and innocence that we bring into the world when we come into the world. There's like babies don't even need to know how to trust. Those are all concepts.
Yeah.
They're just purely manifested
Yeah.
energy. And
Yeah.
then life happens and we learn fear and we learn anger and we learn pain and we learn all of
Yeah.
these things. So with Neptune and Aries, at best, we can become aware of our divinity and what we can do, the magic we can, manifest.
Yeah.
But that will also require that deep, deep, deep self-awareness, because when
Yeah.
we're feeling scared and afraid, then we tend to manifest our fears as well.
Then in a way, maybe Neptune in Pisces 2011 to 2025 was preparation for Neptune in Aries. So
It always is, right? The
Yeah.
previous line, it's the
Yeah.
lesson. We've learned these lessons now.
Yeah.
And now we can move to the next part. So
Yeah.
think of collective consciousness from 2011, and I can see it in terms of, even because I've been doing astrology that long. I'm sure you can see it.
Yeah.
The collective
Yeah,
has now woken up to this mystical reality.
It is quite strange while watching the rest of the world waking up, having thought they never ever would.
Right?
So
now we're going to start to move to the next thing. But then how do we not get deluded with this ego and self-importance that I am God, I am great? How do we still maintain that humility? Because
if we're all God,
I am nothing. The divine is everything, right? Nothing or everything, right? This body is a channel for that.
Yeah.
And so what do spiritual practices really teach us? They help us fortify the body, Yasmin, right?
Yes.
The mantras, the meditation, it's disciplining this body.
I love that.
That's what even yoga is. So you're making the body do these things, but the discipline is really that learning to train that consciousness, the monkey mind, which is, has us, and we live in a society where everyone's, media, all of these things. I really advise people to watch what they absorb from the external. Like, what are the images you're taking in? Yes, there's war in the world. Yes, it's good to be informed, but you don't need to see everything. The most, in fact, helpful thing we can do when we're feeling so helpless and powerless, watching war and devastation, is to tune in and find peace within. Because that's the only way we can slowly rebalance those scales of the world.
So on that subject, your chakra experience, do you think that was Kundalini awakening? Or
yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that for people who don't understand? Go really basic, okay?
Sure, very basic.
First of all, was it something you were aiming for?
No, not at all.
And was it a physical experience?
It was a very physical experience.
So tell us, where were you? Walking down the street, minding your
own
business?
I was in this cafe, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I unconsciously, there were many things that happened leading up to it, where I was meditating, I was studying, I was in that constant space of yearning for God. So on one level, I was always there, but did I ever think that I would have a Kundalini experience? No, never in a billion years.
Wasn't something you were working on?
No, not at all. I didn't even think it was possible. I thought it was just something I read in the books that happens to saints.
Okay.
In India who are like, whatever.
Yeah.
I was drinking, I was partying, I was doing all kinds of things.
Being a New York girl.
Well, being a New Yorker, like all the things that, okay, not necessarily technically considered spiritual. No, it was none of that. But what I can tell you is, and what my teacher has also said, it's about having that. My heart was pure. My heart was pure when it came to God. It really was. So in that moment when it happened, it was pure grace, Yasmin. There's nothing, in that, only grace. There's nothing we can do to awaken Kundalini. It is grace.
So what did you feel physically?
So physically, I can describe what I felt. So it started out with me standing in that shop, feeling this gust of wind, and it was like it came in through the crown, and I felt like a little trickle of electricity just go all the way down to my root, and then I felt my root kind of open, and then this trickle start to come up. Okay, it was a trickle. It's like this light current of electricity, like passing through me. And all this is happening like in a split second, and the guy is handing me a sandwich, and I'm walking home being like, okay, what is going on here? Something's not normal. Then as I was walking slowly, it started to like get more. Think of it like a fountain, like a volcano. And then over a period of 2-3 days, it just kept growing, like the intensity. Like I could, Yasmin, I didn't sleep for 2 weeks at least. I was awake. When I say awake, you can't sleep because it felt like the whole universe was inside me. I was one with the universe. I was not, there was no thought. All my chakras were open, my third eye, everything. I felt like I could throw fireballs from my hands.
Wow.
I felt like I was walking on air because I was so light. When they say enlightenment, it's not just a mental, intellectual thing. It's a physical quality of lightness, not even like darkness and light, but the quality of air, like lightness.
How has it changed you?
I was reborn, Yasmin. I mean, I could hear my mother's thoughts in India while she was thinking them. I walked out in New York City, like for a week, I didn't leave my house because I knew this was happening. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. I was just big. My energy was the whole universe. So it was that's what I mean by fortifying the body. Like later, I'll get to it in a second. I walked out on the street for the first time, maybe in a week. You know, New York, you know how busy people are, Yasmin. You've been here. People don't even, everyone's just doing their thing. No one even looks you in the eye.
Yeah.
People were stopping in the street and just coming to touch me, just crowding around me and touching me.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know why they were doing it.
Mm.
I knew why they were doing it. It wasn't me, but it's divine energy.
Yeah.
Why do people flock to gurus?
Yeah.
It's the light.
Yeah.
So for those few weeks, I was a complete empty vessel. Like Priya was not there. I couldn't even. And then at the end of it, well, I say end of it, I say it because it's the end of that experience. That's still the reality of consciousness. Even if I'm not in that state of consciousness, that's still the reality. I know that because I've experienced it. So, but by the end of it, it got really intense where, Yasmin, my feet were on fire. My body, like my hands were on fire.
Right.
Like you couldn't see it, but the heat was intense.
Had you spoken to anyone in the meantime about this, what that was going on?
No, who could I speak to? Everybody was me. I was one with everyone. That's when I realized I needed a guru.
Mm.
Until then, my whole life, I've grown up in India. I've been invited to go see gurus all my life. There's been, they've been all around. I know that it exists, but I've always said no. Like I always felt like my guru, like I trusted myself. I knew God was within me. When I had that experience, then I knew, okay, Priya, you need a guru who can teach you to handle this because nobody else can. And that means that I needed to find a guru who was enlightened. And I couldn't find a guru. But after that experience, I think this happened in 2008. I met my guru, my Amma, in 2014. So since I've met her, this is my guru is Amma Karunamai, for anyone wondering. And she comes to the US every year. But after I met her, since 2014, she's been teaching me meditation, mantras, and all of these practices, which ultimately they're meant to fortify the body because the Kundalini awakening is going to happen to everybody. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It's whether in this lifetime or next, it's happening to all of us. It's like the seed that's planted is ultimately going to blossom.
That's what all the people mean when they talk about ascension to the fifth dimension.
Sure. Yes. I mean, these are all phrases, right? We're coming up with
Or
concepts
maybe, I mean, I don't really understand about ascension, but a lot of people are pretty obsessed with it. Maybe it's that we all get enlightened by Kundalini.
I mean, that's the thing. Various systems speak of the same energy in different languages, just trying to explain what's unsayable.
Yeah.
I'd stick to Vedic knowledge because obviously I'm Indian, and the Vedas are the oldest texts that we have for humanity. So, everything's in the Vedas.
Mm.
The Vedas themselves, it's considered perfect knowledge.
Yeah.
They say that when universe is created, destroyed, like the Big Bang, whatever you want to call it, and then there's dissolution, and then creation happens all over again. In the Vedas, it is said that the only thing that lasts through these cycles are the Vedas.
Mm.
Because God wants humanity to have that knowledge.
Mm. So we all need to read the Vedas.
I mean, it's not, you could not all read the Vedas. There's Vedic scholars will spend lifetimes to that knowledge. But that's why we have yoga and we have the simple things that have been given to us where we don't need to be intellectuals to understand all of it. It's given to us in simple form that the common man can practice and get the benefits of without understanding it. Like, I don't need to know how the washing machine works. I can just press the button, it washes my clothes, that's good enough.
Yeah.
So I don't think everybody needs to read the Vedas, but yeah, make use of the few things that we've been given, like Ayurveda, which is natural medicine.
I love that.
Or yoga, or even
chanting.
simple prayer rituals, mantras.
Yeah.
These are accessible to us.
Yeah. No, I agree totally. So in fact, funnily enough, Priya, I was going to ask you before we finish. We've got such a limited time left now of Neptune in Pisces because it's finishing next year.
Right.
And I was going to say to you, what should we do between now and then? What do you think? But you've kind of just answered the question, because I think what we should do is as you say, embrace the numinous, embrace the Vedas. Or I mean, some people who are Christian might be thinking, well, I'd rather embrace something Christian.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's fine.
That's fine.
For those of us who feel drawn to Indian things like Ayurveda, great. And if we don't, that's fine too. Everybody does does what they do.
Right.
But maybe it is about really, digging in. And what about people, like the one thing that I always think of when I have this conversation is,
people who don't believe in God.
Vegetarianism. Because, in India, all the spiritual people are vegetarian.
Right.
What do you think about the world where people are eating steak and sausages and having barbecues?
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. And I will say I'm not vegetarian. I do go long periods of times when I am. So I'm prefacing by saying I would like to be, but I'm not completely vegetarian yet. The thing with vegetarianism, it's more than, and this is now after all this understanding of karma. Yes, you're killing another animal, they have feelings, that's one level of it. If you want to be more selfish about it, we are what we eat. You are eating an animal's suffering. That suffering goes into us. Our mental state is, I mean, that's what yoga is, right? It's having that balanced diet. When we eat meat and when we eat like processed food, it affects our state of mind. So when you're eating vegetarian food, you have a much calmer mind. You're just more balanced.
Unless we discover that plants suffer when we grow them and cut them down.
Right, but God gave us that to eat, right?
Yeah, but then didn't God give us animals to eat when you think that the animal kingdom basically eats each other?
But
lions,
but there is isn't there a difference between us and animals?
Well, there was.
The animals.
I mean, there is now, but initially, back in the day, there's lion. I'm not trying to make a case for meat eating. I'm
not posing a philosophical question to all of us.
Well, lions eat zebras, and zebras probably eat, I don't know what, baby cheetahs or something, and baby cheetahs probably eat dogs, and dogs eat, cats.
But they say that the human birth The Buddhists will say this, Vedas will say this. I'm sure I don't know about Christianity. The human birth is given after many lifetimes. And the human birth is given for one reason, and that's for the purpose of enlightenment. So there's a reason we have an intellect, which animals do not. So we can make a choice. It's not that you can't eat it. Like, yeah, a lion eats a cheetah, that's fine. He's an animal. That's the animal chain. You are a human being. I am a human being. I have a choice. I have free will.
I kind of feel like animals might be enlightened, though.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? So what does Krishna say about karma? Do your karma, leave it up to me. Don't be attached to your actions. So in one sense, it's like, okay, the more I identify with my actions, then I am taking on that karma and I will bear the consequences of it. I mean, this is very subtle, balanced spiritual talk, Yasmin. I think you understand what I'm saying, but I want people to also take it in that vein where either we can surrender it all to the divine and say, God is doing everything through me. And then if God is doing everything through me, would God really want to, hurt another being? Or I am doing this and it's okay. Like I still eat meat. So the way I kind of reconcile it in my head, and this is my own justification, is that maybe I have some karma still with these living beings that I am eating. Maybe they ate me in another life. I don't know. So I just try to be like, I just thank God for the meal and, I let it go at that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Very interesting. All right. So on that beautiful, philosophical, mystical, unresolved
As is Neptune.
Exactly. Tell people where they can find you, please, Priya.
I have my website at cosmicdiaries.com. Please sign up for my YouTube channel, YouTube/Cosmic Diaries, or you can find me. I have a podcast on Spotify, which is Cosmic Diaries Astrology. And yeah, my website. So Priya at Cosmic Diaries, or my Instagram, Planet Priya or Cosmic Diaries.
Brilliant. Love it. Thank you so much for being here. There's
such
a long conversation we could have had, but we're just stopping it now so that we don't overdo it. But yes, that's the big message of the week, really, guys, is think about Neptune, because Neptune's thinking about you.
Yes, he is.
All right. Lots of love. Okay. Thanks, Priya.
Thank you, Yasmin.